There's a program out west that is absolutely thriving. And when they were a G5 school, a lot of people kind of just ho-hummed them. But now all of a sudden that they're in the Power Four, they are making some noise. We're talking BYU Cougars next on the College Huddle. And joining me now here on the College Huddle is Trevor from Saturday Warriors. What's going on, Trevor?
Hey man, living the dream.
Yeah, it's one of those things right now where when you are a fan of a certain school that's doing well, life is good. And so life is good for Trevor right now. BYU, great season last year. Let's just start right there, Trevor. You joined the Big 12. You're one of the schools that got the invite to the Big 12, and BYU really not only held their own, but really showed out last year and showed that they belong in the Power Four. So, as a fan and as someone who covered the team, how did kind of give me like your feelings of 2024 and what that was like for you to see that happen?
Well, first off, thanks for having me on to join you. It's been a long time coming, and
Yeah.
I've loved being part of the College Huddle and collaborating and talking with guys across the country and programs. And it's been a great experience. But in terms of 2024, it was surreal. BYU fans went in, I think, a bit skeptical into 2024, not even projected to like Vegas odds were that BYU, I think it was like 4.5 wins or something for the season. And everyone's like, BYU fans are like, well, I'm not that down on BYU, but like 6, 7 if things go well. I saw some people say 8 or 9 wins. I didn't see anybody in their right mind saying BYU could get to 10 wins last season, and they were just rolling on and on, and had some close games, but maybe some would say they were fluky. But those fluky, the law of averages, BYU ended up losing a couple fluky games, so it all kind of evened out. But really came onto the scene last year against Kansas State, and what just Kansas State was ranked. This was a big time game, big hype. Okay, let's see what happens here and how BYU holds up. And they just completely steamrolled Kansas State, and from there, like, got BYU fans kind of believing, and then just went on to a 10-2 record. It was a little bit disappointing at the end. BYU really felt like we're one of the top 2 teams in the conference, but just the way it came and stupid tiebreakers didn't get into that conference championship game. Not saying BYU would have necessarily won it, but to have that chance to then get into the playoff and, really showed out in the bowl game against Colorado, who got all the hype. I mean, even while they were getting blown out by BYU, still continued to talk about Shedeur Sanders, got all the hype. And BYU, it's like, hey, look, we're here and look what we're doing. And so, and despite all that, it's still disappointing because I felt like BYU was not even in the conversation for an at-large bid to the playoff. And not saying this, there were several teams that were deserving, but to see that BYU wasn't even mentioned with those other teams that were just outside, I was like, well, BYU was right there with them. And so it's frustrating because still being part of the Big 12, still being kind of a newcomer, not necessarily given the benefit of the doubt the way other teams are at times, but still really happy with the way the season went. I mean, it's just really setting things up for the future for BYU.
Yeah. So, you lose to Arizona State, you lose to Kansas, but you beat SMU, and you go 10-2. You beat Colorado in your bowl game, so you're 11-2 season. As a BYU fan, and feel free to, toot your own horn, man. That's part of what this is all about at College Huddle. You got to feel like you guys would have given Penn State a better fight than what SMU did in the CFP, right?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. Now, that game against SMU was a rock fight. I think BYU was still figuring things out. It was early on in the season, so was SMU. But what BYU showed against Colorado, and it wasn't the only time BYU had games like that, that it was all phases of the game. And that's where, a lot of people, commentators, whoever out there, say, hey, we have the eye test with BYU. They don't look that good, or they're winning because of this. But I was like, this is all part of the game. And BYU um, excelled in special teams, but also defense continued to set up the offense with short fields and special teams flipping field position and putting the offense in a better position to succeed. So was our offense like the most impressive offense you've ever seen? No, but it was all three phases of the game working cohesively together to put that offense in the best position possible to score. And as we show, like, the record shows like BYU was successful doing it. So yeah, I would have loved to have at least seen BYU get to the playoff. Now we have this conversation amongst BYU fans is, well, would you have rather gone to the playoff and let's say you get blown out, but hey, you made it to this playoff, or what BYU had going up against Colorado and just completely wiping the floor with them and just essentially possibly sinking Shedeur Sanders' draft stock in that game single handedly. So it's, obviously getting to the playoff is huge and would have been amazing. And would have loved to have seen a matchup against Penn State or really any of the other playoff teams. I think BYU could have gone in there and at the very least held their own, but it didn't work that way. And so, now we're looking ahead to 2025.
Yeah, and you have a lot of reason to look ahead to 2025 with, um, some serious expectations, and one being you guys got one of the better coaches in college football. I'm going to butcher his name if I even try to pronounce it. I will let you do that. I call him Coach K. Uh, he's the football's Coach K, not the basketball's version of Coach K. But the guy has been at BYU for a long time. He's an alum. He played at BYU. He understands the culture and some of the things that makes BYU unique, which I will have you explain for people who aren't maybe familiar. I'm sure most of the people who are going to watch this are familiar because they're college football fans and or they're BYU fans or followers of your channel. But there's a lot of people who might watch this who aren't familiar with the religious aspect of BYU and what that entails. And so I'll let you kind of explain that, but you have a unique guy in place who understands all of that, embraces that, and uses it to his advantage as a coach when it comes to recruiting, when it comes to development, and those things. So talk a little bit about that and just, kind of uh, the uniqueness of that and how BYU is kind of just using that as a launching pad for their programs.
Yeah, absolutely. So BYU is owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. A lot of people still know the church as Mormons. And uh, so there is that religious affiliation. Things are different at BYU. We have a honor code that, probably stricter than most universities, even other schools that have honor codes in terms of premarital sex, drinking, drugs, smoking, whatever, and various other things outside of, the things that people like to talk about. But along with that is, I mean, it is a religious atmosphere. Obviously, it is predominantly members of the church that attend BYU. And so athletes coming are, it's always been viewed as a detriment for BYU in the past of something you have to get around. Well, we have this honor code, but whatever. And nowadays, we're actually seeing that change. Being in a power conference has opened up a lot of doors because, I mean, you're playing at the highest levels of college football or college athletics, whatever sport it may be, and so that is no longer a barrier. We look at AJ DeBonsa. His parents were very involved with his recruitment for basketball, and they liked the fact that it was, hey, come here, go to school. Like, we're going to help develop you to become a pro, and we're going to help develop you to be a better person. There's not all the distractions that you're going to have in other schools. So if you're serious about your craft, you want to learn, you want to develop, come here and we can help you do that. Additionally, BYU has a huge network and it's nationwide because of the church. We have members everywhere. For example, I'm based out of Virginia. And so a lot of people that, maybe don't aren't going to have that same opportunity to go professional in athletics are looking at this as a great networking. And so that's something that is also preached a lot. But Kalani Sitake specifically for football, his motto, his mantra is love and learn. And so that's really his. I mean, he's a great guy. He, by all accounts, everyone that knows him personally loves him. Like you said, he came up through BYU.
Mhm.
He gets the culture and really has developed that locker room. And I think that speaks to a lot of guys. They come in and they're part of something bigger than just them. And all of a sudden, those things that people say, hey, you can't do this or that there, those don't become as important as what you can do and how you can develop.
Yeah, and he's also unique because not only is he an alum and he understands the religion and the 2 year mission and all of those things that
Yeah.
these young men prepare for and take advantage of, but he also is of Hawaiian descent, if I'm not mistaken, and so
Samoan, but he grew up in Hawaii, I
Samoan,
think. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but
so
Polynesian, yeah.
Yeah, so Polynesian, thank you. So I mean, there's that as well, and football is really taken off within the Polynesian culture. A lot of schools are trying to tap into that because of their toughness and their, just their upbringing with that. And so he has that with it as well. And so just a really unique man with a tremendous understanding of BYU and the game of football and his Polynesian background. He's got to be just considered a gem for BYU, man. Like this is like the perfect coach for you guys.
Oh yeah, he's the perfect fit, and as long as he wants the job, he has it. They've already when he came on in 2016, I know they've um, renegotiated his contract at least a couple times in his time with BYU, and continued to, because he's had some interest from other schools. I think he talked to Oregon, USC previously, but he wants to be at BYU. As long as BYU's given him the resources to continue to succeed, he wants to be there. This was his dream job, and he's doing a magnificent job. There's been some times that a lot of people have not been impressed. Obviously, BYU's had a couple down seasons under him, a couple
Mhm.
seasons not making bowl games, and people, kind of criticize him. Obviously, the head coach is going to get the brunt of that, but they've gone out and made some changes to the coaching staff, brought in some other supporting coaches. BYU's defense, for example, has taken a big step forward when they hired former Weber State, that's out of the Big Sky, based in Utah. Um, Weber State head coach as the defensive coordinator, and that has just taken our defense to new levels. And so, continues to make tweaks like that through the program, and shown that he can adjust and continue to build and bring in those players. And like I mentioned, recruiting is better than it's ever been for BYU. It's always been, hey, we have to do more with less, because we're not at the power level, because we don't have the same financial resources, because the honor code, whatever. And now BYU is going to have the opportunity to start doing more with more, because we're bringing in more and more 4-star recruits. We're having a shot at a 5-star quarterback recruit, Ryder Lyons, and BYU's up there in the running for him. And so it's just a new era for BYU.
9 seasons as a head coach, 72 wins, only 43 losses, 7 winning seasons in those 9 years. Only two seasons where he didn't have a winning record. That's impressive. And yeah, I think that there will be other universities that might field a phone call, to try to call him up. But if he's that invested with BYU, I think uh, he'll stay there, and that's good for you guys.
Yeah.
Now let's turn the page and look towards 2025. What has BYU done in the off season to continue to try to keep the level of success that they reached in 2024, and maybe even beyond? Try to get to that CFP, win the Big 12.
Well, if you're a Utah fan, you're going to say, well, it was to poach Utah players, which there is some truth to that. BYU ended up a couple players of top players from Utah are switched to BYU and transferred. and should be very welcome additions to BYU and needed positions. But BYU actually is competitive in the transfer portal and has started using it more, um, not sparingly so much, but just very focused strategically.
Hmm.
Because a couple seasons ago, when we didn't make a bowl game, BYU had, again, we're stepping into the Big 12. There's a lot of turnover and a lot of chance to bring in new guys, and it was just so many new guys that I think the team didn't really gel in that short amount of time. And so now the focus is, hey, we're going to keep developing, and we'll bring in guys from the transfer portal as needed. And like I mentioned, the recruiting is getting better and better where we can do that. You can start bringing in these high recruits, bring them in, let them develop, let a guy, as you mentioned, go on his mission for 2 years, come back and not have to jump right in, because a lot of them are not, most people are not coming back football shape, and that's when injuries and things happen. And so maybe they come in later at the season, maintain their red shirt, whatnot. But so that's been a big focus, is just kind of continually keeping the covered stock with the next generation of guys that are going to be taking over. And so I think that has made a big difference.
Yeah, it's so unique. Now you mentioned the mission. I've brought it up once. For someone who's not familiar with the Church of Latter-day Saints and BYU, explain what the mission is and how that is can affect the football team.
Yeah. So young men and young women, but in this case, football, they go on their missions for 2 years. So they're called to go to a specific country or area, region, and where they're assigned to for 2 years, where they go and proselyte and teach people the gospel, and go about that for a couple years. And they can leave at 18. And so most people choose to do it out of high school. Some people delay, they go to school for a year or two, whatever, and then they go. But football players generally now are coming out, especially if their birthdays are early enough, come out, go on their mission so they can come back, maybe hit up spring practice, or join the team as soon as possible. But oftentimes they end up redshirting for that first year back, just so they can get back into football shape. And then they look into starting to play more significant minutes after that. So whenever somebody commits, I mean, that's why it's really hard to follow BYU recruiting, especially.
Yeah.
I mean, one, you got the transfer portal, you got people flipping all the time, but you got people going on their mission, coming back. And then even when they're back, you may not really know that they're back, because they're never going to see the field for another year. And so by then you've forgotten all about them. And so it's keeps it interesting.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why when you look up BYU's roster, you see these guys who are 23, 24, maybe 25 years old, and you're like, "Wait, what? How's this possible in college?" Well, it's just the nature of a BYU student who's a part of the Church of Latter-day Saints. So I wanted to make sure that we clarified that for some people if they had a question as to what the mission was. All right, let's take a look at 2025 here real fast and kind of get an idea of what we are looking at in the schedule for this year. So, again, 11-2 overall last year, a tremendous season for BYU. They had just a phenomenal year, and let's look at this schedule and see if they can even come close to repeating that. So, I have the schedule pulled up here, Trevor. Let's go ahead and dive into it. Portland State, I think that should be a dub. We shouldn't have any issues there.
If it's not, it's going to be a long season. So yeah,
Yeah, that's right. Stanford. Now, Stanford, I still, when I see Stanford, I still think old Pac-12, but Stanford out of the ACC, that'll, I don't know if I'll ever get used to that one. At home, September 6th. Again, Stanford, not a great year last year. I think BYU's probably got more horses than the Cardinal does. I think that should be a win for you guys as well.
yeah,
Do you
they fired
agree?
their head coach, and so they've got a lot of turnover. BYU's benefited from some of that. So yeah, I hope that's another win. A night game at Lavelle Edwards Stadium. I feel good about it.
Bye week number 1, followed by a road trip to East Carolina. Now, Trevor, I got to tell you, the athletic director here needs a little bit of education. You guys are no longer G5. You don't need to go to East Carolina to play a football game, okay? Act like a big boy. You're a big boy now. You get them to come to your house, okay? This is something I'll never understand why some of these schools do this. We see it in the Big Ten too. Northwestern's taking a road trip to Tulane, and we're like, what are you guys doing? Like, but I get it. It might have been on the schedule before you guys were in the Big 12, etc. But that's a no-win situation, man, because it's a game that you're expected to win, but now all of a sudden you're putting yourself in a position where if you lose, it doesn't look good, but and you're going to their place to do it. So, Trevor, East Carolina.
Well, what's funny is, well, let me speak to your first point. Is yes, so Tom Homo, who's actually retiring now and stepping aside, but he is very loyal to people that helped BYU during the independence era. It was not easy having to schedule all your entire schedule out of conference. East Carolina was a partner with ours of BYU's, throughout that time where we've had a couple games. And so he wants to, right or wrong, he wants to respect those games and those commitments as much as possible. So I respect that. But yes, many BYU fans feel exactly as you do, and I get where he's coming from. For me, I'd probably say the same thing as you, except that I live in Virginia, so that's a game that I can travel to pretty easily. So I'm
Yeah.
actually excited about that. So I'm a little bit different than maybe your typical BYU fan on that regard. But yeah, speaking of which, East Carolina, well, we played Portland State. It was 2017, and that was a rough year. And we beat them to start the year, but it didn't look pretty. Also played East Carolina in 2017. I was at that game and also lost that game. So I'm hoping we're not seeing a repeat of that. This team, by all accounts, should be different than the one from 2017. But yeah, it is a risk going to East Carolina. Hopefully, as we kind of keep going forward, we have fewer and fewer of these types of games on the schedule.
Yep. Okay. Um, that's well put. The rematch against Colorado from the bowl game. You got to go to Boulder on September 27th. I don't think this is going to be the same Colorado team. They lost a lot. Um, how you feel about this one, man? I kind of feel like BYU might be expected to win this one too.
Yeah, and obviously both teams are going to be different from last year, so you can't just say, "Oh, there was a blowout. We're going to see that again." Having said that, losing two of your pieces that really made that team run, and the way that BYU really had that Colorado team figured out, I feel really good about BYU's chance, especially early on in the season while they're still becoming cohesive as a new team with a new quarterback and a new unit. I still like BYU's chances, even though it is at Colorado.
Country Roads takes a trip into promo. You got the new looking West Virginia Mountaineers coming into town. I feel good about this one for you as well since it's at home. Maybe a little bit different if you had to go out to West Virginia. But Rich Rod, we'll see what he does in year one at West Virginia. Of course, given NIL and the transfer portal and things, you can turn a team around much quicker these days than you could in years past. But I still think Rich Rod it's gonna take him a couple years to kind of get West Virginia where he wants it to be. So I feel pretty good for BYU on this one too.
Yeah, I will make a Michigan reference because Rich Rod, when he went to Michigan and took over the program, obviously very different. We were used to, the Big Ten style of, we're tough, we're going to run it at you, and he came in and wanted to implement his very up pace spread offense, and he was doing it, and he wasn't able to adapt with the personnel that he had. He had Ryan Mallett trying to run that offense because that's who Michigan had at quarterback when he took over the program. And so I just don't know if Rich Rod can come in and until he gets all his guys in there, if he is, and maybe he's changed. It's been a long time since then, but if he's flexible or adaptable enough to take a program and work with the pieces that he has on that level. So yeah, I think in year one, while they're still figuring things out, I think it's a good time for BYU to catch West Virginia at home.
Yeah. On the road at Arizona, tricky game here, man. Arizona's got some athletes. They're also early in their rebuild as well. Not a great year last year for the Wildcats. Again, if this one was at BYU, I'd say no problem. But going on the road might be a little bit trickier here. But I still think BYU is probably going to be favored in this one.
Yeah, not a gimme by any means. I don't think we can expect Arizona just to automatically be as bad as last year, but yeah, I feel good. I would hope that BYU goes into this and comes away with a win.
All right, then the big one, man. Homecoming against Utah. For people who aren't familiar with BYU, Utah, and the rivalry that is, and especially now that it's in conference, tell everybody about this rivalry. And number two, making it homecoming? Hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. See, when I saw the HC next to Utah, I assumed that meant high school, but I guess that's what that meant on the schedule is homecoming. So I thought that was a dig at Utah, but no, I mean this is a really big rivalry, as anyone knows. Obviously, most programs in college football have a really big rival, and they know what those games can entail. I think the Holy War is an underrated rivalry. I think it's definitely top five in college football in terms of just people don't understand. BYU and Utah they're 45 minutes apart from each other, and they're intermixed. And you've got it's but with families intermixed, it's very personal and it's very heated rivalry, and it's a great one. And it brings out a lot of the best and worst of people throughout the rivalry. So it's a big one. It is crazy. It's homecoming, although I don't know how much homecoming really matters to people anymore. I but my big thing is having a bye week so early to have this rivalry game in the middle of the season instead of putting it at the end, or instead of giving both teams like they did in 24 is both teams had a bye week the week leading up to it. So you allow both teams to kind of rest and prep and leading into it. This is weird placement for the game, and it's coming off of a long stretch of, like we said, BYU should be favored in these games, but it's still a long stretch of playing, quality opponents that to go into it, that anything could happen. And BYU, after a long stretch, a long drought against Utah, is now on a 2-win streak over Utah, and it feels very satisfying. We'd like to keep that running, and Utah would like very much to end that. So, really, anything can happen in these games, no matter how good or how bad, when the teams are. It always seems to be a close one.
It is one of the best rivalry names
Yeah,
in college. That I will absolutely attest to. The Backyard Brawl is another great nickname.
I like that
The Civil War is a good nickname.
one.
The Holy War, I love, I love that name. Um, all right, so after that one, you guys go on the road for two tough games in conference, man. At Iowa State, at Texas Tech. Whew, brother, those are some tough back-to-back games for you. There is a bye mixed in between there, but coming off the Holy War to play those two teams, and you look at those three teams in a row. If BYU goes 2-1 in that series, it is celebration time for the Cougars, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. This is without a question the toughest stretch of the schedule. And as we mentioned, coming off of that rivalry game, I mean, it's really tough. There's a big letdown. Whether you win or lose, there's a lot of energy and emotion that goes into that. And it's hard, I think, to get back and refocused that next week. And you're always coming and you come out beat up. And then to be rewarded with a game at Iowa State the next week. And you mentioned there was a bye, but then at Texas Tech. So that is definitely going to be very difficult. If BYU comes away 2-1, I would be happy with that. Obviously, I think BYU has a chance to win all those games. I don't think any of those are out of reach, but it is a tough stretch. And so people out there that are saying, "Oh, BYU's got one of the easier schedules out there," I was like, maybe. I mean, I don't. completely buy into that, but this stretch right here is going to be brutal for sure.
Yeah. No, that's it maybe in totality, but when you look at where those games are placed, man, those three right there, that is nasty. TCU at home, and then at Cincinnati, UCF at home to finish off the regular season. I again think BYU is probably going to be favored in all three of those games. Um, so I'll say this: if BYU does go 11-1, you're going to the Big 12 championship with a chance to play for the CFP to get into the CFP. Is BYU good enough to do that, Trevor?
It is a good question. You asked me a couple months ago, I would have said yes for sure because we're bringing back a lot of guys. We have some guys that decided to come back instead of and forego a chance to leave early, like for example our star wide receiver Chase Roberts. However, there was a big wrench thrown into BYU's plans when allegations of BYU's quarterback Jake Retzloff came out against him, and it's crazy that I don't know outside of BYU circles how widespread this would be. I feel like if this were a Big Ten quarterback, this would be national news and at the top of ESPN, and Sports Center and everything. But this definitely puts a wrench in things. It's very tricky because he was the allegations of I don't want to throw off your channel or anything, but of abuse and there was an instance that happened and he's claiming innocence. You add in the extra layer of the honor code of, well, even if something happened that was consensual, that would render him ineligible at this point. Outside of the initial allegations, nobody, including the school, has said anything yet, so everybody's still uncertain as to what his status is going to be going forward because these are very serious allegations and you don't want to reward someone with playing, who's done this, and it's not, these aren't legal. The police haven't come to press charges. This is a civil suit against them, but also you don't want to pass judgment on someone before they've even, consider them guilty before even, going through due process. And so it's very messy. I'm glad I'm not involved with all that. Having said all that, I think the most likely scenario is that we lose our starting quarterback and that we have to bring in one of our backups who have a lot less experience. So that definitely changes things for BYU. I would say most likely loses, BYU's floor or ceiling probably a little bit lower, but I'd say more their floor I think is now the range, I guess, of expected wins is a little bit lower, maybe a couple wins off of that with another guy in there. And so I think the rest of the team is set up for success. And we have, our O line's looking good, and we have the running backs to do it. That it might be able to take a lot of the burden off of the shoulders of a young quarterback. Fortunately, both of them have started for albeit a group of five schools, but they have started at other schools and they've been with the program for a year. So you're bringing in guys who know the system. And our starting quarterback, I don't think he got enough credit, but he also made a lot of mistakes, Retzloff, that is. And so you bring in one of these younger guys, and it's not like you're replacing, Heisman level quarterback. If they can come in and just control the ball and, be smart with it and do enough to keep BYU in a position to succeed. And like I said, win on all three phases, playing complementary football. I think BYU still has a chance to be very competitive and to still make it to the Big 12 championship game. But obviously, it throws in a lot more uncertainty having a new quarterback versus a guy who's been there and almost did it, just the previous season. So that is a lot that's going on for BYU, and it really leaves us in kind of this precarious situation because there was a lot of hype and hope going into this season off the heels of what BYU did last year, and now all of that is kind of just uncertain.
Yeah, it's up in the air, that's for sure, man. So I'm going to throw out a number to you, and again, the ceiling and the floor are that gap is going to be really large because of the situation that you've presented. So I'm going to say BYU's floor is 6-6, and the ceiling is 11-1. And again, the that situation plays a lot in the that big of a gap. But saying those numbers, do you think that that's legitimate?
Yeah, I mean, I still think BYU does better than 6-6. I would say, I mean, obviously, it's not out of the realm of possibility, especially in the Big 12, where that's known for having depth. And every year, it seems to be the opposite. Teams that you don't suspect to be good end up being really good, and vice versa. And so, obviously, anything could happen. But I do think realistically, I would expect, even if things don't go as BYU would like, we see them at 7 or 8 wins, maybe even 9, and still, depending on tiebreakers and things, maybe have an outside shot at the Big 12 championship game. But yeah, I do think. I mean, things could go incredibly well and hit 11-1. That feels less likely now with a new quarterback. But I think we see somewhere from 8 to 10 range. It would be kind of my realistic expectation. But yeah,
Okay,
anything could
fair
happen.
enough, man. All right, Trevor, I'm gonna present this question to you in closing here because I enjoy your channel. And a year ago, around this time, man, you were slamming out videos on conference realignment that were just they were good stuff, man. You were getting some big time numbers, brother, and I appreciated that. And so you were one of the guys that I kind of went to for that kind of information. You talked to a lot of people, you interviewed a lot of people. Um, and I don't, obviously, number one, I think you agree with me. We're not done with conference alignment. It's going to continue to happen. That being said, I want to pick your brain specifically on Big 12. There's some steam out there for Utah to join the Big Ten. You hear that every now and then. I don't know that it's a two-way road with the Big Ten. I think it's maybe more one way with Utah, it seems like a little bit. However, I do believe that the Big Ten wouldn't mind the Salt Lake City market,
Mhm.
obviously, for obvious reasons. And of course, the Big Ten is very serious about increasing that thumbprint, especially when it comes to television deals and rights. So that being said, has things calmed down? Number one, with conference realignment in the Big 12, and number two, kind of give me what you think the next shoe to drop might be when it comes to the conference.
Right now, I mean, yeah, Big 12 is on hold right now, as I think everybody is until the ACC comes to some, gets a little bit more clarity, which some of which has come. And the way it ended right now is I think we'll end up seeing around that 2030 mark, these schools that now have an easier path out of the ACC will start looking to go elsewhere. The Florida States, the Clemsons, the UNC, and they're all going to have, all of them have a case for either or both of the Big Ten or the SEC. And so I think that will be the next shoe to drop, and then from there the dominoes are going to start to fall. So it really depends on which one of those two conferences, where those schools end up, that's going to have a domino effect. I think also we're going to see, like, are we headed to some sort of, super league, or are we going to see some sort of Big Ten and SEC break away and do their own thing? How big are these conferences going to be? How big do they really want to get? But let's make the assumption right now that if things stay as they are and we see the playoff expand to 16 teams, and the Big Ten and the SEC are like, yeah, we'll grow a little bit more. I just don't see them getting too much bigger. 20, 22, maybe 24. But and if that's the case, then Utah may kind of start becoming, get in the conversation. You also have Arizona State, which also has a huge market, has a huge alumni
Is, yeah.
base, is AAU, almost certain. And so, there's other schools out there that are, Utah can say all they want, how they fit and how they'd be a big ad, but I just think there's so many other schools that are higher up on the priority list. And so at that point, then it would start looking, could start affecting Big 10, Big 12 schools, depending on just how big these other two conferences want to get. And at which point the Big 12, I think, would be in a position to start looking at other ACC schools. Not saying they would leave. They would be in a, there's going to be so many variables that we have to see, but there are a number of ACC schools that I think would make a lot of sense in the Big 12. And that could be a possibility too. And so one of the advantages that the Big 12 has is, everybody says, slams them. Look, you guys got rated early. You don't have any major brands left, which I don't think is completely fair. I think there's some pretty decent brands. No, we don't have like the Blue Bloods, but there are some pretty decent brands. But arguably, yeah, they're not the biggest brands out there. Um, but it also means that for the most part, Big 12 is kind of settled and is in position to not really have to worry. Whereas the ACC still has those big brands. It's like, you're next. Like, it happened to the Big 12, it happened to the Pac 12, and now ACC, we're looking at you. And so they're the ones that are really on thin ice trying to keep their conference together. And the Big 12 can kind of sit back and make moves as it makes sense for them. So I think we're on hold for now. I don't see Big 12 adding any other schools Brett Yormark has looked at in terms of basketball, trying to add a Gonzaga or a UConn or something like that. And it just really hasn't gotten traction with the conference as a whole. So I think it's really looking down to when those other conference schools, like I said, those big brands from the ACC want to get out. And we're looking at the next TV deal for the Big Ten and for the SEC. When their current TV deals start coming up, I think that's when we start seeing more action.
Given the fact you guys have Cincinnati, West Virginia in the conference, it seems like to me that Louisville, Pitt, and Virginia Tech make a ton of sense to solidify that region of the country for West Virginia and Cincinnati. You got 5 schools all within driving distance of one another right there on a Saturday, where that could be a nice little pod in the Big 12 on the East. We'll call it the East Coast,
Yeah.
Midwest East Coast. That would be a ton of fun, man. A ton of fun. You got the backyard brawl, like I mentioned earlier, there between Pitt, West Virginia. Cincinnati and Louisville are old rivals, and Virginia Tech, throw them in for fun because that's right there, close by for all of them. And Virginia Tech, they still hold some pizzazz a little bit, a little cachet there. I know Beamer's not been there for years, and that makes a big difference. But Virginia Tech, they still hold a little bit. I think those ACC schools, to me, make the most sense for the Big 12. Do you agree?
Yeah, geographically, culturally, for the most part. Although hearing Pitt fans, like just seeing Pitt fans on Twitter and things, um, they remind me most of Utah fans. I think they'd come in and very much maybe begrudgingly join the Big 12 and kind of look down on it, which would just feel, and all of us who have been, supporters of West Virginia for so long, being in the conference with them, I think we'd all be on their side and of the backyard brawl. But no, and that would just make it more and more interesting, obviously. But yeah, I'm with you totally. Like, those are all schools I'd have my eye on if I'm Big 12. Now there is like some, depending on everything's so fluky, weird things that you could see a Miami somehow getting left out of the
Mm-hmm.
Big 12 or the Big 10 and the SEC. There is a scenario where that something like that could happen, and maybe a Miami falls to Big 12, but I don't really see that happening. I think the brands you mentioned would be like I'm not for like conferences getting any bigger. I already think conferences are too big. But if that's the way that we're going and the Big 10 and the SEC continue to grow and the Big 12 sees that opportunity, they would be a great fit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you do have UCF, and so when you have UCF and Miami, okay, I can see that, but it would be really hard for me to see the Big Ten not jump on Miami, especially if Florida State were to go to the SEC, because I do think that Miami would, the Big Ten would want to get some kind of footprint in the state of Florida. And every Big Ten school, when they go to Florida, they would be going there big time because that's a vacation trip, man. So big opportunity there. I just think that makes a lot of sense. And of course, North Carolina seems to be the gym. That seems to be the school that everybody would fight for. What would be interesting is where does that leave Duke? And of course, Duke football, not exactly a powerhouse, but Duke basketball, yeah. And sign me up for Duke Kansas twice a year. Who wouldn't want to see that? as a college basketball fan. But I digress. We'll see.
I have a
Trevor,
question.
yeah,
I, I have a question for you on this. So, being a Big Ten guy, and I grew
yeah.
up in Big Ten country, and so I kind of get, but I've been out of it for so long. I'm just kind of curious on your perspective on. Okay, obviously you're sitting pretty. You got a lot of major brands, one of the strongest two conferences, really in a good position, especially come realignment. You're kind of helping drive things. Um, what is like what do you want to see? Like how do you feel
Mm.
about these new look conferences? Like even though like yeah, you've gotten some really good additions, like is it what you want when you think of Big 10 football? Is that who you want to be
Oh
playing?
no,
And
no.
and do you want to see it continue to grow or do you want to see a separation from the Big 10 and the SEC away from everyone else?
I grew up when the conference still had 10 schools. So I very much am a traditionalist at heart. I
Yeah.
would love to see watching the Pac-12 die the way it did was devastating to me.
Mhm.
My heart broke um, for those schools that kind of got left out in the cold. Cal, Stanford, Washington State, and Oregon State became like my go-to fandom. I'm like, those two teams should play every single week and declare one of themselves like a CFP team, whichever team won more games. Um, it broke my heart to see that because I think college football really had a huge opportunity that they missed because what made college football special, in my opinion, was the regionality of it.
Mhm.
And when you could have said, all right, kind of similar to what we see in college baseball, where you win your conference, your region, and then you then go to the CFP. So your Pac-12 champion, your Big Ten champion, your Big 12 champion, your ACC champion, your whatever SEC. If I didn't mention them yet, those five, and then three additional teams at large teams, one being probably Notre Dame, one being a group of five school, and then whatever team was ranked highest from there. That should have been the 18 playoff
Yeah.
in my opinion. If you won your conference and you had the opportunity to that to me should have been number one. That's how you get in the college football playoff. To me, 16 teams is too many. I'm very much of the school of thought that less is more. And I'm saying this even though yeah, a lot of people know I'm an Ohio State fan. I think 12 to me is almost too many. And now we're going to go to 16. To me, the perfect number was 8. You had that perfect opportunity. You had 4. You had 6 New Year's bowls, so you had 4 in the first round, 2 in the second round. There's your bowl games, and then the national championship game. And so you went from 4 to 8. Okay, great. Let's play from there, and then you earn your way in through, like I said, being a conference champion or then one of the three at-large bids, whether that be Notre Dame, a group of five school, the top group of five school, and then whichever school was in the top 8 that didn't win their conference.
Yeah.
Um, so that was my school of thought. That was my opinion. Um, but I'm also a realist, Trevor, and I realize that my traditionalism is never going to drive this bus. It's about money with Fox and ESPN and NBC, and they're the ones driving the bus here, and so it's only going to get bigger. I do believe that we are eventually going to get to an NFL light. I think that there's going to be basically two or three major conferences that will have divisions within their conference. And you have to win your division to then go to your conference tournament to then go to the playoffs.
Mhm.
I think that's where the money's at, and I think that's where we're going to go. So I think how we get there is kind of the tricky part. I think it's going to take a lot of time. But yeah, I believe that whether it's whether the Big 12 is a part of that or not, I don't know. I would like to see that be the case, but whatever model, whatever model the NFL is, that's eventually what we're going to get. Including, I believe, eventually we're going to get to where these kids are going to be unionized and they're going to have contracts with their schools as well. I think that's eventually where we're going to get to.
Well, contracts probably make sense because what they have is wild. But yeah, I'm with you. I think realistically, that's probably where we're getting, which is too bad because it turns off so many fan bases. Because
Absolutely.
part of why maybe a BYU fan. Now, I like I said, I actually grew up in Michigan, so I'm a little different. But maybe why a BYU fan would be interested in Michigan, Ohio State is because it's all part of the same sport, the same league, and it's really exciting to see some of these other teams. If this is just a completely different sport at some point, like there'll still be some casual interest in that, and you're still going to get like the bulk of the people, but you're losing a lot of the passionate fan bases
Hmm.
in the periphery. And it just kind of, college sports I think is unique because that's what makes it special, is all these different fan bases and this emotional investment in it, and we all benefit. It's like, yeah, you got Purdue, Northwestern, whatever, but you guys all benefit from being in that conference
Hmm.
together. And you don't have Ohio State and Michigan without also having these other schools that you've continually beat up on, but also just that are part of that conference, that fill out that schedule and fill out that regionality and make that conference. And I think it's that way. And to your point, there's 70 FBS, or sorry, Power Five, if you include Notre Dame schools right now. That I did videos on this, and I'll probably do follow up on how I'd like to see it end up. Is, 7 conferences of 10 would be perfect, because 10, you play every team in your conference,
Yeah.
and
That's
in
the way.
basketball
That's
you
the
do
way
it
it
all the
should
way.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely. That's the way it should be. And you win your conference and then you move on. That's the way it should be. But it's politics and it's money, man, and it's where we're heading, unfortunately. But we're
Unfortunately.
Trevor and I will be here to talk about it. I promise you that much here in the College Huddle. Trevor, tell everybody about your channel, where they can find you, man.
Yeah, find me on YouTube is where we're at, and it's same as my Twitter handle, so you can look for it that way. Or Saturdays Warrior, type in BYU. Hopefully, I come up through the search engine. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter. There's my handle. I got links to YouTube there, so come check it out. Join the conversation. Try to do throughout the summer live shows on Monday evenings. We might be hit or miss. It's the summer, but still lots to talk about, and love to get the fan interaction and get input. And that's really why we do it all, is we love having these conversations and getting everyone involved. So come check us out and join the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's got a great channel, guys. You're going to absolutely love it. Trevor, we appreciate having you on. Now, my last question on the way out, I asked this to everybody. If I were to happen to go to Provo, Utah, and I was going to go to a BYU game, first off, I wouldn't wear red. I know that. So, but how would I fit in as a BYU fan? Is there some kind of slogan, some kind of chant, some kind of hand signal, something I would do so that BYU fans would think that's a Cougar?
um, well, they don't sell alcohol in the stadium, but don't be drinking alcohol on the outside. That would throw them off. But
Okay.
no, the specific chance, I don't know. Ooh,
Gee,
um,
what do BYU fans say to each other?
well, they said go Cougs. So if you flash this, it's
Okay.
actually the Hang 10, which is what some people think it is, but it's also Y in ASL, and so Y for the BYU, and yeah, so that's an easy one. If you want a quick one, you just flash this, say hey go Cougs, and people are in.
Go Cougs. There you go. I got it, man. I think I can fit in. Although wearing that color is going to be difficult for a Buckeye. I just,
It's very different than
it
the
is.
Michigan
It's
blue.
more
So
it's more of what I would say Kentucky blue, but I'm sure there's a little bit difference between Kentucky blue and BYU. Of course, I love the old school navy blue that you guys wear sometimes. Like, I kind of like that look every now and then too. But BYU, man, check them out. Go over to Trevor's channel, Saturday's Warrior. You're gonna love it, my friends. Trevor, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. Great to catch up with you. Great to have you on the College Huddle, and looking forward to watching BYU again this season. So till next time, everybody, go Cougs.
I go Cougs.